Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So please take your seats. So we had a little delay related because we listened to the chairman of the government, and so I'd like to welcome you all at our session dedicated about the strategic goals, so Russian jurisdiction, so the factors of attractiveness and competitiveness. But I'd like to remind you that on May the 7th, 2018, President Putin signed the decree where he identified the priorities for the national projects. So there are 12 projects of the kind. And so then the relevant decisions were made at the level of the government of the Russian Federation. We fully realize that the interaction of the bodies of public authority, federal, regional level, municipal level, so jointly with the entrepreneurs and business community, is exactly one of the main and most important point that may help to implement so the May decree of the president. And so the problems that businessmen have, and so they need to be certainly adjusted, corrected, and improved. So then within the framework of the Gaidar Forum, so this is the first session of the kind, and I'd like to thank the Vice Premier, so then Mr. Chuychenko, so that he agreed to make a presentation at our session. And I would like to offer him so let's begin our deliberations. And so the first presentation, so there's a small presentation so that we have prepared jointly with the Russian Academy of State Service. And over to our next first speaker. Thank you, dear colleagues. I consider it a great honor just to provide the results of a very serious, voluminous work of the Association of the Lawyers of Russia, so the higher school of law. And I'd like to talk about, so then this presentation was prepared on the, so with the help of the Association of the Lawyers of Russia, and so then the bar, public organizations, so many joined in this effort. And so I'd like my opening remark will be what Mr. Medvedev said, so that the era of the development of the judicial branch, and so then the unique and international and dialogue between the international and the Russian legal authorities, and the establishing of the sovereignty of Russia. And I'd like just to point out, so then Mr. Yakovlev, who died last year, so the head of the bar and the high school of law, Mr. Yakovlev, who actually spoke about that, and he said that was the main assumption of the main. So because there are two main problems that actually generated the reformation of the judicial system. So these, so then the unified methods of the application of the law. So that certainly will allow us to build a very reliable legal infrastructure. So because strong, so it should be. We need to replace the word strong for attractive, because when we come and we talk to the adults or just those who begin their education, we always talk to them so that in the modern world, so the most important. What is it? The most important thing for the modern man? So to be attractive, to be agreeable, because so a girl needs to be liked by a boy needs to be liked by a girl, so professor for a student wants to be liked by the professor and our employer, and this is solved since day one. So this is applicable to jurisdiction. Jurisdiction should be attractive, but for whom? That's the main question. So for small, medium businesses, for corporations, for foreign investors, question marks, for citizens, our community, but mostly for national business and for the citizens of our country. So that's the priority. I think that the most important, so that at the Times spoke about that. So then there's no need just to talk about the attractiveness of the jurisdiction. So because the Times spoke about it at length, but at the same time, so then we have ways to identify the convoluted nature of our legal system and to properly build its future. And so then, so the key assumptions that I would like to identify that we have in this presentation, we will see the structure. And so first, we need just to talk about that. We are under a very strict competition of legal systems of different countries, and because the legal systems, so they compete. And everyone is interested just to to attract. So come to us, so to be judged by us, so be tried by us, because use our law. But at the same time, so there are restrictions. So what looked ideal and very attractive from the viewpoint of the jurisdiction of legality, and so there are challenges related to that as well, because we analyzed this in our presentation. So then the Anglo-Saxon attractiveness is going down, and so the attractiveness of our national legal system is going up. And so we need just to think the prospects of our national legal system, and so where you then the attractiveness of the integration procedures that Russia participates. So then certainly it's certainly it's the Belarusian and Russian legal system. So then the instances of legality of the Russian Federation. So we need just to see those jurisdictions and the legality of this, and so in which Russia occupies a very worthy place. And I think that we'll talk about that at length. And so then we'll talk about development of social infrastructure besides the legality, and that's an introduction of new IT technologies. But about the attractiveness, this assumption, what does it take to be attractive? So what does it make? So there's all these subjects so need to be liked by each other. And so certainly it's nice just to be properly dressed and nice and so, but what important is to be open, sincere, and transparent. So these are the minimum. When a person is open and sincere, he is attractive. If the legal system is open, transparent, understandable, so this is the most important component to guarantee its attractiveness. And the next assumption in our presentation is, and that's so then uniformity of application of law. And so then we know this very well known understanding of what Mr. Lenin said. So that what he said was very difficult, but actually, so the customers of the law, so they have the right for so equal application of settlement of their disputes, despite the fact where this settlement of disputes takes place in the Russian Federation, in France, or in England. So in the modern world, so then so let it be dirty but evenly. So this army law that we don't like very much, but actually it's becoming more and more dominant, because the judges and the citizens of different countries with different legal cultures, a different level of economic development, and nevertheless they're less and less ready to accept the situation whereby so the settlement of disputes differently judged by different jurisdictions. And so then we need the trend to converge, and so then to get so the same rulings, in spite of the fact that the countries and the legal systems are different. So then the third assumption, very important Russian challenge. So this is the challenge of so fairness and law. Fairness and law, because we keep saying that fairness is a priority above law, fairness, but at the same time, so we studied some polls and public studies, and so because the procedural fairness is very important, because the fairness should be distributed evenly, and then so everyone is equal to the law. So this is the approach, and this is why this approach for the not the distributive fairness, but the procedural fairness. That's a very important subject. And the fourth assumption, we fully realize the jurisdiction is the most national aspect of any legal system or jurisdiction. So then the nationalistic aspect. So can imagine that you're a foreign investor, and so you come and you study the legislation of the country, and so you understand it, although there are differences. But then you go to the procedural legislation, and then you understand them as well. But the most interesting thing starts when you go to judicial system, and the judicial judicial system, and this is where it becomes very difficult. You understand the law, you understand the procedure, but if you understand how on the base of this law, so how the procedure will work out, how justice will be carried, so then you will understand the law properly. But if you understand procedure and law, but if you don't understand what the result might be, this is very bad. This is a very bad judicial system. That's why when we talk about the not only about the quality of legislation, but we talk about the quality of the law application, of the law, how the regulatory institutes within the framework of the procedures apply the national system, applies the special agencies, the judicial, and so this is the national jurisdiction, and how in practice they apply. This is very important. So we're not talking about the adjustment of the legislation. So then doing business, and also we're happy because we are on the place number 31st place, and so then even the and so what we're talking about about the practice, so application of the law and the mechanisms of carrying justice. And so this is very important part of the judicial profession, because the lawyer is the most national profession. Because all the values and requirements of the law, but we need just to stand by the interest of our own state and of our own law. So it's important how they construed at the court. So, for example, so then foreign partner, national company, so who to give the preference to. So to be impartial or not, to be biased or not, or support your own. And so that is why we're coming to a new roadmap. And we offer you the main points which tell us that. Certainly, then the creation of attractive atmosphere is very good. So attractive jurisdiction is more important than just currying favor to its own national business. It is much more important. So legal fairness. And then I will end by saying that what the modern judge should look like. And so this is nothing special. So then 12 years ago, Mr. Mao just gave me as a criteria about the way the judge should be. What are the criteria? So then the experience of the bar, and so then paying taxes, experience in the university, educational community, and then experience in working within the law system with the judges, with the system of the judicial system. Experience needs to be required. So, but we need just to understand that the logic of having all these components that every judge should have, and then certainly proper legal education, proper judicial education. That's what we're doing. So only when all these components are in place, only then the judge is the judge that we all want. And so then there is a phrase. So always keep saying that the quality of the country is determined by where people get education and where they get the medical treatment. So if the people just go to a Russian hospital and go to a Russian judge, it means that it's a quality state. So if they go elsewhere and get their education and get their medical treatment and legal treatment only abroad, so because that's why we want to be treated and carry justice in Russia. So, so the association of the bar and so our academy, and so it will be published on the site of RANEPA, and so then traditionally we are putting together this session, and so we're ready for a dialogue, and so we're ready to take your intakes and your points, and we're going to add them to our agenda. And our partners, representatives, the Ministry of Economic Development, Minister of Finance, Minister of Justice are here, present here, so the main three ministries, so which actually make great contributions in the issue of national jurisdiction. But before I give the word to them, so I'd like just to give the plenipotentiary Mr. Titov, head of entrepreneurs, Mr. Titov. Thank you. Very good, very beautiful presentation. I think that 99% of the entrepreneurs that would have heard you, so they would have said what this is all about. And because then the jurisdiction has very specific things and very specific interpretations and how we evaluate this or that jurisdiction. So what is it? So first, it should be transparency, professionalism of the judicial system. So first, second, it should be unbiased. So it should be a simple, not too burdening administrative regulation that should help the businessman and not create additional hurdles. So if he does business in conformity with the law, and then finally, the criminal law should not be used to take business away, and so that the rights of the businessman should be inviolate. So now we fully realize that. So then there is corporate law as well, as we all know, that is evaluated within the jurisdiction, so to be able to protect its rights through the civil legislation as well, using civil legislation. But we cannot say that our jurisdiction is at a very attractive level, so we cannot say that. Although say that to get medical treatment and to get good education and legal legal recourse is I think that out of these principles, only just getting married, this is what the Russians are willing to do in Russia, and so getting legal remedies, so they go elsewhere. And so I don't want just to be the pessimist, because I see every day number of claims, complaints, and the tragic cases, because every criminal case is a tragedy for any businessman. We understand that, but I think that there is still a little signs of improvement, small signs of improvement law. So there are lots of criminal cases initiated like before, and so then the law is interpreted so there should be uniformity of the application of the law, but it's not. There is no uniformity. So that's because there's always, and the businessman is always at fault. And so Article 159 is used the way they wish to use this article, and use it as a bludgeon. And so then there are fewer people, businessmen, who are sent to remand prison, which is very good. So during the initial investigation, when the person's guilt is not yet proven, so he's not sent to the remand prison. It's already good. So the number of those people suffering in the remand prisons is much better now. So there are fewer people now than used to be, and so this is the and although so we still have lots of businessmen are arrested, so they're denied their freedom, but there are fewer cases, so we can, so usually is the home arrest, but for business the home arrest is not good. So this measure of restraint is not good too, before the guilt is not proven, because to manage your company even out of your home is very difficult and very challenging. And that is why, from the viewpoint of the regulatory point, the problem is still outstanding. So then there is this process that has just started, that the chairman of the government spoke about that, so that the legal guillotine is beginning to work, because there are there are many problems concerning the surveillance and control, and so there are many problems, and so because there are no we just don't know how many demands to business the legal system has, and because it's all very murky and uncertain. And so that is why. So we're trying. Because some companies went over to the justice system, but the problem is that it's very slow, sluggish process, and eventually I hope that we'll get to a level to the standard checklists. And yesterday at the meeting of the chairman of the government, so then today's his presentation, actually he mentioned so that we need guidelines, we need frameworks, because for business it's not important what's written in the the requirements of the supervision bodies, oversight committees. So because we need exactly to know. So, for example, if his business in feeding people or just raising potatoes or growing wheat, so every business needs to know exactly the exhaustive list of claims and complaints and requirements. So there's so there could be the main guidelines. So just what kind of fire protection services can send their representatives, so then and other things, and so there should be no additional requirements so that are not part of the checklist, not part of the guideline. And this is very important. So this guillotine, if it works, so that cuts away superfluous, ungrounded requirements, so to the businesses. So then the system. So we agreed that so what the experience that we'll do the testing. We're going to test. So we're going to do some pilot programs. So that's in different business activities in different regions and see how it works. So we're going just to send some trial balloons, and together with the regional associations, so we are putting together this trial guidelines. So these pilot projects. So then, and we need to put this level at an average international level, because that exists in developed countries, in Western countries, and so build these guidelines, model them, and try them and see how they work in the regions. And so, for example, restaurants of the Kaliningrad area, maybe it will work. Let's see. That will be just. We'll give it a trial, and see. And then investments but investments do not depend on what kind of risks exist in Russia. So how the judicial system works, but the economy is very important. Is it profitable or not? That's why the judicial atmosphere is good, but no legal system, no judicial system, even the best. So because our constitution in the Soviet Union was the best, the most democratic constitution, but it didn't mean that we had any democracy. That's why neither of the legal system would not be able to attract investments if it's not profitable to operate, to do business in Russia, period. And if they could not make profit, that's why. So this is the most important part is economy, the economic policy that is being pursued in Russia, and so there are very serious problems in the economics area as well, because the costs going up, profits drop. And so we need to build big safety cushions, but only for the state for some reason, and no safety cushions are being built for businessmen or for the people, only for the state. But that's another subject for discussion. So you are like a representative of the economic state quarters. So you handle these issues very well. You're so very knowledgeable. But at the same time, Putin said that the most important task of the decree is to increase the quality of living of the Russians. And so then the Ministry of Economic Development, how they're planning to implement this idea, how are you going to enhance the quality of life of the Russians? And because the main task, as it was set in the decree of the president. So thank you very much, because you quoted the president. Putin recently said we have the Ministry of Ideas. So this is the Ministry of Economic Development, Ministry of Ideas. I think that the most important idea, that came to me when I was listening. So how the discussion was actually identified: attractiveness and competitiveness of jurisdictions. So this is the caption of our session. So attractiveness is another word for stability. So because when I know exactly the rules of the game, so if I know that for what are the rules we're going to stay in what country and how they are applied, then competitiveness as well. On the other hand, so I think that there is a lot of talk about how the changes are taking place, because the speed of changes is going up, and the state that regulates public relations needs to certainly not to fall behind and keep pace. New relations appears, new technologies, so we need to regulate them somehow, and the speed of change certainly should be should be quite considerable, and in the regulatory area, so they need to meet the demands of the today. And so how just we combine it? Stability on one side, and then dynamic development of the Russian jurisdiction. If we talk about the instrument that guarantees stability, instruments, for example, evaluation of the regulatory application.
So, yeah, hundreds of billion rubles, even trillions of rubles for the business would be saved when through this tool you can prevent excessive liability, excessive financial obligations. Only in 2018 we calculated that excessive norms actually wasted approximately 150 billion rubles only in 1 year, and this work is very important. So there should be an entry barrier. And on the other hand, we have cases when we had even whole new institutions up and running, and with the introduction of new regulation, we had certain targets. So why should we have this new regulation? A very useful tool that we start carrying out this year is evaluation of actual impact. We need to look at the key institutions in terms of investment climate and entrepreneurs' activity. Have they achieved the targets that we had when we passed those laws? Or we see that the actual is different from the expected, and we hope this new tool will really prove useful by the end of the year. And all those 18 areas will go through this procedure, and the Ministry of Economic Development keeps coordinating this activity. On the other hand, a very important sustainability factor is the enforcement, the applicability, and the surveillance activity. And I have been talking to the entrepreneurs and controllers, and I see that we actually have not developed the instrument of the clarifications. Now the controlling agency does not have the right to elucidate how to apply. And in practice, we sign the documents. When the business has requests, we say, for instance, when there is an inquiry, they say that they are not in a position to elucidate the cases, the inquiry, and that's what we have to fix. We need to develop instructions of interaction of the businesses and authorities to clarify how to work properly. And speaking about competitive jurisdiction, now with a new development, a new technologies development, we have an issues of applying those new technologies in our life. And one of the options is the tool of creation of so-called regulatory sandboxes, when the new regulation would not cover the whole country, but would just be applied for separate participants or some local territories for some locations. And this new tool will be actually checked by the results, and if the effect is positive, then this regulation may cover the wider audience. So kind of a pilot. So this draft law on such sandboxes have been prepared by us and now are submitting it for discussions. And I believe this is the tool that can ensure competitiveness. And I believe that with all our activity, with the new requirements, we have accumulated extensive array of requirements that actually burden and prevent our system from development. And very often people are unaware of them, but the controlling agency still may require that the entrepreneurs comply. So the initiatives that we discussed today of Mr. Medvedev, that we need to introduce the regulatory and legal guillotine, is a proper solution. Because for many years we have been trying to consider this from many angles and listening to entrepreneurs. And we have been working, but the volume is so huge, we cannot really handle them in other ways. So I believe this is the main tool that can be used to increase competitiveness of our jurisdiction. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to ask a kind of provocative question to some extent. Mr. Trunin and we discussed competitiveness, and as an expert on taxes, I always think about competitiveness and getting the funds into the budget and jurisdictions. And usually the taxes collection increase through benefits and lowering taxes. But look, today, the first vice premier in charge of the whole economic development is the finance minister. And in the previous government, he was the finance minister, and with the main goal to spend the budget funds reasonably. And sometimes it boils down to restricting the spendings. But now, as the first vice premier, probably he will see the main function as development. No, that one was just VP, and now Anton Gemrich is first vice premier. And what do you think? Shall we be able to create conditions within the next 6 years so to stop the competition between the ministries and entrepreneurs, so that we would join forces in one direction to get this breakthrough? I thank you for inviting me. Indeed, discussing the legal systems and jurisdictions and competitiveness is not a really conventional discussion topic for finance ministry. I can only say that indeed we have no special contradictions between our ministries and agencies, and moreover, if we don't join forces anyway, we shall fail. So I don't even want to speak about it. There's no subject matter. But for me, as a taxation expert, it's unusual to discuss the topic of jurisdictions for the reason that for us, for tax people, for fiscal experts, something else is important. It's not the jurisdiction where the taxpayer is registered or a transaction is structured, but where the taxation base. And usually competition is the way to move the taxation base. And that's what people fight globally. But certainly it means that we should think about our competitiveness. As we say you better go to court and go to doctors at home, because it's on one hand it's prestigious, and if international investors service their interest and structure their companies in the Russian jurisdiction and litigate in the Russian courts, it will certainly facilitate the quality of the Russian jurisdiction. And the competitiveness of the Russian jurisdiction is not just a goal that will support national prestige, but contribution into the quality. What we do in the finance ministry jointly with the economic development and the economic bloc of the government to raise the fiscal
and the competitiveness of the Russian jurisdiction. We need to raise it. So we're trying to introduce new instruments, which on the one hand should be innovative in their nature. So we're trying just to think up
способы, в том числе исполнение налоговых обязательств.
and So at the same time, so we're trying to borrow the best that we can see and apply it. So these regulatory systems and instruments to Russia and apply them as well, because if they work well, so that it could be much easier and much more profitable and comfortable to pay taxes in Russia, like in the most popular jurisdictions for the investors. And then so there are some constraints. So then the new initial assumptions. So then the external constraints that we have been having in recent years. So these constraints, international constraints. So first, so they prompt our businesses to come to Russia, to return to Russia, and at the same time, so we need to devise new instruments that would make it possible to come to Russia and to exercise this move in the most comfortable way. So administrative area, that's a new thing. So then from the tax, it's not such a revolutionary leap, but it's a special administrative region area. So I don't know if you've acquainted yourselves this package of this law. So that was approved last year. So there are two administrative regions now. So they're up and running. So they became effective. So it's called the multi-law. So it means that the law. So if you're a resident of the special administrative region, so it's considered to be the governing law in your region. And then from the tax point of view, so it should not be, so the conditions, the terms should not be worse than in other popular jurisdictions. So for instance, the taxation of dividends, holding legislation, reporting, etc. should be no worse than in the best international legislations and jurisdictions. So it was very actively discussed, and so everyone was involved, everyone was excited. That means that it was very pertinent, and it was so passed last year. Then the next point, which is very important, to increase competitiveness of the jurisdiction, to make it more flexible. So then to welcome the challenges. So this is a very important problem for the tax legislation in the development jurisdictions, where the investors like to work, and so they come to us. So you can come to a regulatory authority and to get a motivated opinion, which will be the foundation for taking a certain oversight solution, supervising solution, controlling solution. So you can always come and so these instruments of horizontal monitoring. So we just introduced this new instrument of motivated opinion. Because we work together with the tax authorities, because when a taxpayer comes for a motivated opinion, and it's a big challenge. It's something very difficult, and then certainly it's a big challenge for the taxpayer, and then it's and for the tax authorities it's a big challenge, because so if you provide this kind of motivated opinions, so will be the basis of how this taxpayer will be paying his taxes for the upcoming years, and so that's why it's very challenging, very difficult decision to make. And so then the last thing that I wanted to say, what is important in order. So this is a system of requirements of controlling and supervising oversight commissions, so that it would be in conformity, and so the different spheres of regulation and the progress made in different spheres of regulation should be in conformity with each other. So they should run at the same neck and neck. So let me give an example. So just for many years, it's not a secret. So the tax authorities and the Ministry of Finance and the government, so they've been working together to improve tax administration. So we came, so then to avoid paying taxes is getting more and more difficult. So what come to that? Because the majority, so more people just pay the taxes. And so basically, so then taxpayers pay the taxes. But we understand that when we were not so successful with tax administration, so many taxpayers did not honor their commitments. So the tax authorities work with it, so they do the audits and the checks, they do the checks and the audits, and then they come to a happy medium solution. So not to destroy the business of the taxpayer, so to give a delay, so for paying of taxes. But at the same time, so we need to understand that the tax administration should be a rigid and strict system, because if people stop paying taxes, so then it's bad too. But there's a criminal code, and there's an article. So then, so when the person can be prosecuted for failing to pay taxes, for avoiding taxes, and so then the audits of the last years went to prove that all tax issues were taken care of. But then what we have, so then they start to initiate criminal proceedings, criminal cases. Usually, so they peter out, nothing happens, but it's very unpleasant process, and it's not good for business. And so that is why so sometimes it's not, it makes no sense to just to only try to punish the criminal. And so then we started to apply the new tax regime. So very revolutionary and so very preferential. So tax, pay 4% instead of 13%, and so if you register yourself as a professional, if you don't make more than 500,000 rubles a month, and you can use only your mobile application for registration, no cash registers, no reporting. So it's called. So then it's the tax on self-employed people. So very revolutionary. But what questions now we have to have? This is experimental now. So then so we have this grace period right now. But if a person believes the Ministry of Finance, believes the government, and they register, and then they do this kind of business, and then, for example, the catering business. Yeah. So if he reports the 4%, so then 4% is not much, but it's good for catering business. But there are other just mandatory payments. How to do business in catering in Russia? They are very binding, very strict, and there are many issues related to that. And so we cannot possibly regulate everything. So just within the framework of the acts of the tax code and the Ministry of Finance, but making this breakthrough, this disruptive decisions. So we need to look at the entirety of the picture, not just 4% payment, but but if we will look at it as a whole, then it will certainly help to improve the situation here. I'd like to give the floor to. So Mr. Novak, Denis Vasilyevich. So the colleagues spoke about the areas that the ministries are planning to implement, but what the Ministry of Justice is planning to do. So because why they don't select Russian jurisdiction, Russian governing law? Because very often business, and so because of criminal cases, criminal prosecutions. So because business goes into other hands because of the raiders, so businessmen lose their businesses. So there is even a law, so it protects foreign investments, and many Russian entrepreneurs, so they take their money out, and then they bring it in under the additional umbrella protection which is provided to foreign investors. So that's what the Minister of Justice is trying to do. What are the changes in the corporate law? And just a few words, if you touch upon. So then the tribunals changes. I think that the reform is finished, is over. So about a year has passed. So the new law has been effective for a year. So let's see what the results are. Dear friends, so going back to the initial presentation, I wanted just to go back to what has been done in the last 5 years to improve competitiveness of the Russian jurisdiction and the role of Ministry of Justice in it. And so we need to mention the reform of the Civil Procedural Code. And so it was initiated by the decree of the President 10 years ago. And it was implemented, has been carried out. So it's coming to an end. Originally this was part of the concept of the development of the civil legislation. So we're coming to an end of the development of this law, and then the changes in the corporate law, and then the agreement, the contract law. So then the changes adopted in 2014-2015. The most important point, the key point is the new ideology. And we already see the effect and the result of this reform, because the colleagues have been working in legal companies, and so they say that while some time ago business did not see in our civil procedural code the instruments that they are used to use but couldn't find them in the Russian legislation, only in the English law they saw it, and so now just they are in the civil law exists now. So that the businessmen that used to find it in the English law, so now they find it in the Russian law. And so we're not talking about big deals or business projects, large scale, long term. So it's much better to use the Russian law as the governing law, because it's cheaper and less costly. And so they're coming to this kind of conclusion. And that is why comparing, so in the Russian jurisdiction, it has its own strengths. And we always had it before. So the speed of considering cases in courts, and it's much cheaper. Vis-a-vis if these debates were considered in other governing laws. But what we still have is a low level of trust to Russian jurisdiction, because how these new instruments will be applied by Russian courts. And very important, it's no secret that Russian judicial system is very conservative, and it cannot just take off right away. It won't work that way. So it takes time, and they will not be able just in an hour's time just to switch over to the way they operated in other countries. So in other of the plenary clarifications of the positions of the civil code were made, and so then there was a provision taken about the interpretation of the law and concluding of the law, concluding contracts, interpretation of contracts. So that was recently adopted, and so then the position whereby if the norm does not say that it's imperative, dispositive, then it should be considered as imperative. So this is the approach that the court should interpret and justify the imperative essence of the norm and how it's protected and what recourse we have. And so then what we need to do next, as I'm just moving over to the issue of the tribunals reform. And so then this conservatism, this inertia, and so then the low speed of introduction of these new norms in the Russian judicial system and application in the courts. So then we can just transfer these settlements of disputes to tertiary courts, to tribunals, because they're much more flexible. So they can just set up special institutes, and the sides can always assign arbiters or appoint arbiters they want, and use it the way they used to do it abroad. But unfortunately, in recent years, then the tribunals have been compromised by those who were using those institutions for malpractice purposes, and so that they were undermined by the illegal application. And in November 2018, so the first stage was finished, and now we have a very good filter whose main criterion is the reputation of the institutes. But then when the state courts continue to distrust even the renovated court of arbitration, High Court of Arbitration, the tribunal, and so they still distrust them because they have already been compromised. And so that is why, so that's why we still have hope that this year they will keep working on it. And so at the end of December last year, so then the review of the practical applications of the procedures, legal procedures, so were interpreted and explained. And so those who were involved and those who applied those systems. But the main point was to deliver this interpretation, these opinions for the state to the state courts, so that they would take notice. And then what else was done from the viewpoint of government regulation? So then changes of the law on arbitration, so that at the end of December was passed, and then we concluded working with bad faith. So bad faith tribunals, those who mimic them. So we're talking about banning advertising who act as ad hoc arbitration courts, so continue working and for malpractice purposes. So we're not talking about some negative attitude to the ad hoc arbitration. Which is not a bad thing, but it's those who use this institution for bad faith purposes. And so now we can say that this process is over. Now we can see and wait for the result. And eventually, so then there is another law which provides for providing special permits for the activities of foreign courts of arbitration. So it will be done according to the criteria of international reputation that this court enjoys. That will be determined by the Ministry of Justice on the recommendations of the Council to improve tribunal investigation.
In December, so this recommendation was submitted to the Ministry of Justice, and during the transition period by end of March 2019. So the Ministry of Justice will confirm the criteria for application, and then we expect that foreign arbitrations who are interested to cooperate with Russia will use this opportunity to come to Russia in order to practice. We already have one application from Hong Kong arbitration. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the competitiveness of our market segment of legal services. It's obvious. Well, the situation is strange, where the Russian professional lawyers and attorneys, well, it's such, their regulations that it's very costly, and to act in the shape of attorneys association or bar associations. In terms of taxations, many confirm that it's just the bar association, the attorneys' offices, the bar associations are less profitable, and these so international companies and their branches use their advantage in terms of more favorable tax mode. And the dangerous trend that we have seen lately is that the status of a lawyer is quite risky, but not protecting the lawyer, though actually the lawyer's status should actually be followed, should like the personal information protection and other things and other cases actually create among lawyers who would like to get the lawyer status, so the impression that it's better to avoid such status because the law enforcement agencies actually scrutinize them much more, and that's what we need to develop and actively work on this concept. And again, I wanted to advise you that many lawyers now ask if they could use this special tax mode, preferential, and that's absolutely serious. You know, they indeed keep asking. as presently the lawyers cannot even use the simplified or imputed tax system. And so they are not entrepreneurs, and not being entrepreneurs, they can only work at the rate of 13%. And recently in the Council of Federation, our colleague spoke that the Constitution Court actually asked the question, why shouldn't the lawyer's activity shouldn't be more beneficent, because a lawyer is a public person, as an element of legal and system, and certainly has certain responsibility and should be motivated, including by taxation benefits motivation. And that's where we believe we should work with the Ministry of Justice and the Finance and certainly improve the situation. And why don't you think about the special tax mode? So one of the factors of the competitiveness of Russia is a happy lawyer. Yes, 78,000 people working in our economics, actually. It's a large number of people. And let me give you an example. We have been performing some studies on the way they declare and what they show in their profits. Those who do not have the lawyer status but works as an individual entrepreneur, they usually show zero profits, but this is the resource that could use attractive taxation and show their revenues and profits. And our goal is not just to address the self-employed, housekeepers or teachers or whatever, but those who provide legal services. Indeed, we thank you. It is very pleasant when we have such arguments between the industries, the whole industries. And let me now pass the floor to our colleagues from the room. And we have Tatiana Shatalova, a judge of the Eurasian Economic Union. And as we're running late and we have further sessions, I would like to restrict your speech by 3 minutes to save time for Konstantin to speak. Look, I'm a judge and I'm allowed to speak here. I'm a judge of the High Arbitration Court. And I'll be talking about the practical things. Everything I heard today is very nice, but it's not going to help. The most important thing, what I understand from my experience, from practice, is that the three contradictions that indeed we observe in our activities, and there is no solution for those three problems. Not even understanding it is just starting. The first contradiction, which I faced in the High School of Economics, it was hard. We were hitting the civil codes against our foreheads. And now it's a dualism of law. The law always develops as a natural part, as principles. You mentioned you did not pay much respect to them, like equality, efficiency, and litigation, fair litigation, and protection of the weak. And that's not being taught to the people who come to court. It's not practice. And the positive law actually comes into our life on a higher scale, and it cannot address specific problem in such a way that a specific entrepreneur and specific consumer of the conditions would be happy. The positive law will always be directed, you want it or not. It can bring to autocracy, to tyranny. So it's up to you to select the mode. And it's always directed at the protection of the strong. Who can protect the weak? It's only the judge. Would the judge be taught? No. Even the approaches and all the textbooks say that you should actually follow the positive law and without thinking. And Marx actually called Hugo Grotz as the main genius of the humanity. Even before the death penalty, he decided that those positive principles should prevail over the natural. And the judge should follow that principle and use the positive law ahead of the natural law. And this is the dilemma that makes our jurisdiction unattractive. Look at the UK judges, for starting Hugo Grotz. Actually, when they judge, they try to use the positive and above the natural. Now, the scientists, actually, law is one of the basic sciences of humanity, and it keeps developing, evolving to address this dilemma. In order to make our jurisdiction attractive, primarily, we need to teach the judges to work in this nature and this dualism of positive and natural. So it starts with education, and so far the education does not address this matter. The second topic you touched today is the opposition of nationalism and globalization. I'm not going to speak many things, but the globalization is winning. Since the first steamboat was invented, the technical progress makes our world develop as one. And we need to protect our national interest, but always think about the global benefits. And so far, we cannot do it. Even in our court, Kazakh judges work better because they decided that any ombudsman protecting entrepreneurs can come and protect Kazakh entrepreneurs into our court, or any trade and commerce chamber can come in Kazakhstan to protect the Russian entrepreneurs. And Russian ombudsman does not provide such a function, and RSPP and TPP does not practice this function. And so our entrepreneurs do not have any protection from general constructs, though we try to help them that much, even against the High Court of Russia. And the third problem depends on you. The third contradiction. Everyone says that the court is the top of the profession, that the peak, and I agree with it, and I actually, that's why I consented, I agreed to come. Because we say that it's only the judge that creates the law. And in the 19th century, that said that the law is what the court says, but the judges are not respected. They are put on the back burner depending on the authority. And actually, do you have a minister who who graduated from some courses? But there are so many judges with kind of incomplete education. And again, jurisdiction depends on who works, on the judges, on their education, of their understanding of natural and positive law, of their capacity to think about the people primarily, and secondly, about the state. But you should always look for the balance, because a human being is a very convoluted, complicated creature, and I saw, many cases. And once we fail to address those three challenges, dualism of the development of law, and then the balance between the national and global interest, and respect to our courts, nothing will change. British judges are very good. I like them very much. But we have many good judges too, but their life is miserable. They survive, and they find it difficult to work in the judicial system. Try to protect them, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. I cannot, certainly I have to pass the floor to Mr. Gennady Nazarov, Vice President. And we have other speakers, so please be brief. Co-chairman of the Business Russia organization, public organization. So we have a project on global monitoring of entrepreneurship with 65 countries participants. And there was a poll in our country on business perception on certain conditions. And out of the 65, we were 64th, with 19.8. So before Greece with 13 points on that scale. And our many entrepreneurs actually leave the Russian business. So what is the reason for that? 14% in the poll say that inefficient state regulation of the entrepreneur's activity, bureaucracy, red tape, and fiscal policy. And it's only 6% of the people who estimated these are the factors that actually oust the entrepreneurs from Russia. And we cannot say that we do nothing. Over the last 10 years, we have changed our legal landscape and the civil code. And the reforms actually helped to introduce 90% of the tools from the British law to the Russian law. And we can use it, and we actually tripled the number of companies that transact in the Russian jurisdiction. And our arbitration and commercial justice increased the up to 2 million cases, so 6 times, and doing business has put us on the 31st place in terms of pace development and the quality of litigation for commercial disputes. And we are the 12th in terms of efficiency of dispute resolution. Its record and the criminal legislation, we have also changed it over the last 10 years. The situation is not ideal, certainly, but compared to the square one, it's like the earth and the sky. We have improved by a factor of 10. There are less, criminal cases and raiders cases. But answering the question, how many companies would be ready to transact in Russia? 45% of the companies said no. And 76% of the respondents say that the Russian jurisdiction is not good for that. So many contracts are once concluded in Russia, so additionally concluded would be signed in the British law or guaranteed by the British law. So they try to back up. And the question is, what can we do? In my view, there is nothing new that we can invent. And we have mentioned all the necessary directions, 3 directions mainly, to bring our legal legislation, legal law, and stop that the situation where it acts like a scarecrow, and get to ideal situation when economic crimes actually cause economic punishment. And washing out the people who can do business from the business turnover.
Тюремные университеты вряд ли мы делаем пользу для своей экономики и для своей страны.
And then the second area that we need to finish, we need we need to make sure that the overwhelming majority of our businesses would be happy with, and So that for the businessman to feel more protected abroad, that's very, and so that's not right. So if the Russian business feels better protected abroad than in Russia, and so we certainly to stop that thing. And then the third, so our jurisdiction should be the best. So if we compare point by point, we're in a good position. Actually, I've given you some examples, but we don't do enough to explain. So the business community and to the public officials, the situation is changing, that we're working our part of the way, so we're trying to do it, that we're trying just to convey them the idea that it's safe to do business in Russia. Legislation is being reshaped and is built just around the business. Around business. So the British jurisdiction is 250 years old. And then every year, so they spend millions and millions of pounds to advertise the image of their jurisdiction. We don't do that. We always badmouth ourselves because all our news, bad news, so naturally. It's only bad news, and that certainly worsens the image and of our jurisdiction, of our own capabilities. So that's 18% of our citizens who believe and want to start business here, because it will be completely different. Because if only 18% of businesses believe that our jurisdiction is good, so that's a good example. So half a year ago, we did the championship. The World Cup, and all those who came and visited, so they were absolutely positive that Russia is the country outstation. It's very dangerous. They were absolutely sure in the knowledge that we were a bad, dangerous, backward country. And then the majority, overwhelming majority of those who came to Russia went back completely changed, with completely different mindset. And so that is why we need to improve the image of Russian jurisdiction and do likewise. Thank you. So then I cannot fail not to give the floor to first the deputy of the Institute of Legislation and the Comparative jurisdiction of the government of the Russian Federation. So besides the fact that he's a wonderful scholar, and his institute where Anatoly Yakovlevich works, develops opinions for all legislative efforts of the government. And I would like to have your say on that. Vladimir Sergeyevich, so first I'd like to say that so we were supposed to have as a presenter the director of the institute, Mr. Hebrieva, and but unfortunately she has some urgent business elsewhere. She couldn't come. She couldn't make it. And then first thing that I wanted to mention is the full understanding that in operability, this term jurisdiction has many meanings. And so many scientists, so those students are here in the conference room. So then jurisdiction, remembering that today I heard someone say, and so then the first presentation, so jurisdiction concerns jurisdiction of the judicial system or the court. So there is the jurisdiction of the executive, administrative jurisdiction, legislative jurisdiction. There are lots of jurisdictions, and not only justice. And so that's why there's competition of different jurisdictions. And so because the competition of the legality, fairness, competing then application of the law, and then other things. That's where we need to. We can compete on different planes, and other implementation of the legal norms. So then supporting law and order. So very high level of observing human rights and all these things, and so that is why this proper application of the law is more consonant with the main topic of this presentation. And then competition of these holistic things is very important, because different jurisdictions can compete and in their different forms. and they can compete. But at the same time, how to organize it in a way that the Russian jurisdiction in this so would have these features of competitiveness, attractiveness, so that our businesses, our entrepreneurs from other countries as well come to us to have their cases settled. Yes, to marry, to be medically treated, and to be judged. And this is very important. So as a representative of science, so then I'd like to point out several things that can improve this thing. And we're running out of time. So which will tell us that science and legislation, we cooperate. And we have touched upon this several times. As the speakers mentioned that repeatedly, that there are new spheres of public relations related to the internet, new technologies, the media, so which actually need to be regulated properly. Properly regulated, they have special preference modes of operation and new norms of regulatory nature. At the same time, the trends are quite contradictory. And to speak only about improvement is not enough. It's not always right, and because then the application, so those who apply the law, and so they need stability, and those who look for a recourse, so they need stability as well. And that is why. So then there are lots of changes in the code of labor, and so which certainly does not contribute to the stability of administrative and legal regulation. This is true of the civil procedural code, civil code, and the practical application, and lots of changes, amendments that are made every day. So it certainly does not contribute to the quality regulatory regulation. And so then another example that shows that we do have a lot to improve, and it has to do with with the state investment policy. So today, besides the budget code and tax code, because the civil code, so 56 laws regulate investment activities in Russia. 56 laws. So so then the 20 of them have been adopted in the last 3 years. So look at this huge gamut of different laws that certainly does not contribute to investment attractiveness of the country. So in the global practice, there are different methods how to address this issue. So we think that one of them is definitely to develop this unified regulatory act, a bill, one set of laws that could regulate and settle these relations. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that so when we speak about so to improve legislation and the jurisdiction, so we're not talking only about the courts and legislators, but we need to add other stakeholders so that could contribute to this, so such as so for example so responsibility, legal consciousness, and other issues as well. And Konstantin Anatolyevich, so we have listened to the presentations of business representatives, business communities, our ministry spoke about that, who are responsible for attractiveness and jurisdictions and science. And then, so what priorities so we have, and the government has for the next year, and maybe for short term and long term. And good afternoon, colleagues. It is true that the attractiveness problem of Russian jurisdiction and Russian legal system, it's multifaceted, and so then I'll try to concentrate on two. So first component is the improvement of the operation of oversight bodies, controlling bodies, audit bodies. And so the idea is that the time of treatment is over. So that's the time of surgery. because therapy is not efficient, and that is why it's not sufficient, not enough. So the time of surgery has arrived, and so we need just to remove the things that are not logical. It's much better just to build a new legal environment, much better, more relevant, and etc.
And so the obsolete regulation should be substituted by the new through this legal and regulatory guillotine. As the people who should act upon it, we understand there is no way back. We are given a year to comply, and after that we shall need to come up with specific results. And the second event that will improve the attractiveness of Russia is improvement of corporate governance, which we also try to improve in the government. We have set up a working group, and I see familiar faces from this group. And any business starts with the foundation documents and registration of the company. Once we evaluate what we currently have, we can see that are hopelessly behind. That's why we are so unattractive in terms of our jurisdiction and corporate governance. Should we take the issue of charter, we see that 95% of existing charter is the imperative law that mechanically are copied into our foundation documents, and it means that people just make money on it. It means that people can twist your arms in terms of the legal help, but it doesn't make sense. Because why should you transform the laws? A couple of weeks ago, we asked an institution of legislation and enforcement law to compare to the German and Swiss jurisdiction. And there is a ban in the jurisdiction on transformation of just copying the laws into the foundation documents of the issuers. So Dmitry Medvedev several months ago issued a special instruction to Ministry of Economic Development in the area of this illogical and unreasonable situation. So we hope to see the results soon and discuss at our working group. And we are not going to stop our activities. The charters should be modern and contain the specific information to codify the company and improve the governance of the company and the legal entity. And the second important component is that just like we said, we are now in the middle of the civil law reform, and we hope that it is improving the landscape. And in my previous life in Gazprom infrastructural projects, what we faced is that business agreements could not get the legal shape, and we had to select another jurisdiction just because Russia did not have the necessary environment. For instance, take the Nord Stream. It's not registered in Russia, not because somebody wanted to take it away from Russia or bad taxation or whatever, just because Russian legislation does not provide, because we reached very convoluted agreements with our partners, and we could not find the necessary legal shape in Russia. Our law does not provide the structure for that. That's why the business selects other jurisdictions, Netherlands, Swiss, whatever, because our corporate legislation is very basic. And if a company or a private company wants to do business, let them decide what to do, whose voice will be the most important. Can they share the money at their discretion? Who will get less? Who will get more? How they distribute the jobs? Who would actually nominate people? And in the 90s, remember, there was a special instruction of Council of Ministers on joint ventures. So from the modern corporate governance, I believe it was a very advanced document, and now we're missing it. We're lacking something like that. And that's when an opportunity was granted to the Russian and foreign partners to shape their deal the way they felt proper. I believe we should go back and revise what we have and improve it. So that goes for the private companies. As for the public companies, we should probably speak about streamlining the corporate governance and minimizing the so-called in-house documents, because it's the management who drafts the documents, and then confirmed by the board. So being a manager of a public company used to perform this activity, and it's clear that we had one customer, head of the company, and we just wanted to please the management, but not the shareholders, which is evil. And I believe in the public companies where the public interest is very high. For instance, in Gazprom, we have 540,000 shareholders, and the regulation should be kind of out of the box. An investor should select where he should select a jurisdiction, or an issuer should not actually go and study the documents and corporate governance of the company. There should be uniformity in Gazprom, Aeroflot, or other public company. It should be, and then the law on public joint stock companies should be, well, we should follow the German example. There should be no freedom. There should be no, use of excessive imagination. And these are the matters that we have outlined for the next year. And we are happy that our leading think tanks, and we want to thank the Institute of Legislation and Comparable Law and the businesses. We want to thank all the stakeholders. We cannot, well, unfortunately, corporate governance alone does not address the issue of attractive jurisdiction, but we should work kind of in an omnipotent way. We should change the holistic picture. Thank you, dear colleagues. We are citizens of Russia, and I hope we all here have high legal education. We are all interested to make our activity useful and leading to clear and transparent results and improving our lives. And I see that we are a team. It's clear that we work in different capacities. Some people work in public domain, in science, in private companies, public organizations, but our goal is common. We're all citizens of our motherland, and we want to live and work and get married and get medical assistance in a comfortable way. So I would like to, well, it is our first session here in RANEPA, and we would like to have you as our key speaker, as a person, as a head of the, well, if they don't fire me, I accept. So we want to thank you and have a good day.